Hey Brock, I said I was going to make this video, and I meant it. Brock, you claimed I insulted your wife. You claim I disrespected her. You make this claim based on a video I just posted. So let's take a look at the clip from that video where I actually mention your wife. Watch it. But surprisingly, as I'm doing this research, I find a story about an apple tree. Not quite the same story you talked about with your wife, but very similar. So, Brock, because you do have a tendency to plagiarize other sources without giving reference to those sources, we can see that in your arguments against atheism and your arguments against evolution. I mean, they're all plagiarized arguments, and some of them are pretty much verbatim the arguments given by other creationists. And then, of course, this one where at least you admitted you got the idea of a book, but you didn't admit that you were quoting the argument nearly word for word, again by Dinesh D'Souza. I'm beginning to wonder, Brock, if that whole love story of yours was simply another plagiarism of a poem that has an unknown author that can be found on the web. Now, true, that poem could have been from your wife, so I can't say for certain it wasn't. But the one article I read regarding that poem said it was from a beautiful 40-year-old woman, so the ages could match. The earliest date on that poem was 2005, December, I think it was. So again, that could be from your wife. Though it's not a verbatim story, which means that your wife may have gotten inspiration from it when she wrote that letter to you. So, okay, where in there did I disrespect your wife, Brock? I did research on the web, finding that you basically plagiarized and quoted verbatim sections from a book by D'Souza. You didn't admit that you were making these verbatim statements from this book. You just simply mentioned that you took your inspiration from this book. By the way, for those who are curious, I think the book's name is Why Christianity is Great, or something along those lines. D'Souza's arguments are poor to begin with, absolutely horrendous. The argument about Christianity and slavery, well, I kind of showed that to be completely fallacious. But now that you've seen what I've said about your wife in regards to the apple tree analogy and women, Brock, I found a poem written with this analogy. The earliest date I found was 2005. Brock, I admitted that this still could have been from your wife. It could have originated from your wife, or that your wife could have found inspiration in it. And yes, I did question whether or not you were being honest about the story in your video, the love story. Oh no, sorry, the love letter, or whatever the video's name is. At no point did I insult or disrespect your wife, Brock. It was you I questioned. And now you've come out using your wife as an excuse to censor my video, to basically remove it from that video as a response to your most recent video. Brock, that's cowardly. It's dishonest. And indeed, it disrespects your wife. Brock, are you man enough to fight your own battles? Do you really feel the need to use your wife as a shield? Because that's what you've done here, Brock. You've asked me to apologize I've done nothing to apologize for. You, on the other hand, have. You owe your wife a grand apology for what you've done. Brock, your dishonesty is pathological. You've used old arguments that have been well refuted as though they're brand new. You've never dealt with valid criticisms of those arguments. And yet here, when I point out and give demonstrable evidence of your dishonesty, what do? You use your wife as an excuse. That's absolutely pathetic, Brock. You use your wife as an excuse to not only remove my video, but to slander me by saying I disrespected her, when I did nothing of the sort. Brock, now I know you're probably going to remove this video, as I will put it up as a response to one of your videos, because I want you to see it. Brock, tell me, do you actually feel as though you've done nothing wrong here? Do you actually feel that you're in the right? You once called me prideful. But look at yourself, Brock. In this case, I'm simply a mirror for your own personal misgivings and downfalls. You're the one that's been prideful, Brock. And your pride has led you to, again, as I've said, use your wife as an excuse for your own actions. Brock, I don't normally say this to an adult, but you really should be ashamed of yourself. The only apology I could make to your wife, Brock, is that I'm sorry that her husband is incapable of dealing with his own problems, his own losses, his own failures, and that he must use her as an excuse. That I'm sorry for what her husband does. That's the only apology I'd make to your wife, Brock. Now, I wish I wouldn't have had to make such an apology. But face it, Brock, I do have a problem. I can't stand dishonest people. I can't stand them in the least. Creationists, some of the most dishonest people on the planet, and you're one of them. So, Brock, do as you will with my videos and my responses and my comments. It only goes to show just how poorly founded your claims and your stories and your arguments are, that you can't deal with it. Okay. Have a good night.